Ayutthaya was a Siamese kingdom that existed from 1351 to 1767. Ayutthaya was friendly towards foreign traders, including the Chinese, Vietnamese, Indians, Japanese and Persians, and later the Portuguese, Spaniards, Dutch and French, permitting them to set up villages outside the walls of the capital, also called Ayutthaya. In the 16th century, it was described by foreign traders as one of the biggest and wealthiest cities in the East. The court of King Narai had strong links with that of King Louis XIV of France, whose ambassadors compared the city in size and wealth to Paris. By 1550, the kingdom's vassals included some city-states in the Malay Peninsula, Sukhothai, and parts of Cambodia. In foreign accounts, Ayutthaya was called Siam, but many sources say the people of Ayutthaya called themselves Thai, and the kingdom Krungthai, the Thai country. Historical overview. Origins. According to the most widely accepted version of its origin, the Thai state based at Ayutthaya in the valley of the Chao Phraya River rose from the earlier, nearby Lahore Kingdom and Suvarnabhumi. One source says that in the mid-14th century, due to the threat of an epidemic, King Uzong moved his court south into the rich floodplain of the Chao Phraya River onto an island surrounded by rivers. The name of the city indicates the influence of Hinduism in the region, as it is the Thai pronunciation of the famous Indian city of Ayodhya. It is believed that this city is associated with the Thai national epic, the Ramakien, which is the Thai version of the Ramayana. Conquests and expansion. Ayutthaya began its hegemony by conquering northern kingdoms and city-states like Sukhothai, Kamphaeng Phet and Phitsanulok. Before the end of the 15th century, Ayutthaya launched attacks on Angkor, the classical great power of the region. Angkor's influence eventually faded from the Chao Phraya River plain while Ayutthaya became a new great power. The emerging kingdom of Ayutthaya was also growing powerful. Relations between the Ayutthaya and Lanna had worsened since the Ayutthayan supported Thalqui's rebellion in 1451. Ayutthaya, a noble of the kingdom of Sukhothai who had conflicts with Boromatre Lokhanate of Ayutthaya, gave himself to Tilakaraj. Ayutthaya urged Boromatre Lokhanate to invade Phitsanulok, igniting the Ayutthaya-Lanna War over the upper Chao Phraya Valley. In 1460, the governor of Chaliang surrendered to Tilakaraj. Boromatre Lokhanate then used a new strategy and concentrated on the wars with Lanna by moving the capital to Phitsanulok. Lanna suffered setbacks and Tilakaraj eventually sued for peace in 1475. However, the kingdom of Ayutthaya was not a unified state but rather a patchwork of self-governing principalities and tributary provinces owing allegiance to the king of Ayutthaya under the circle of power, or the mandala system, as some scholars suggested. These principalities might be ruled by members of the royal family of Ayutthaya, or by local rulers who had their own independent armies, having a duty to assist the capital when war or invasion occurred. However, it was evident that from time to time local revolts, led by local princes or kings, took place. Ayutthaya had to suppress them. Due to the lack of succession law and a strong concept of meritocracy, whenever the succession was in dispute, princely governors or powerful dignitaries claiming their merit gathered their forces and moved on the capital to press their claims, culminating in several bloody coups. Beginning in the 15th century, Ayutthaya showed an interest in the Malay Peninsula, but the great trading ports of the Malacca Sultanate contested its claims to sovereignty. Ayutthaya launched several abortive conquests against Malacca, which was diplomatically and economically fortified by the military support of Ming, China. In the early 15th century, the Ming Admiral Zheng He had established a base of operation in the port city, making it a strategic position the Chinese could not afford to lose to the Siamese. Under this protection, Malacca flourished, becoming one of Ayutthaya's great foes until the capture of Malacca by the Portuguese. First Burmese Wars. Starting in the middle of 16th century, the kingdom came under repeated attacks by the Taungoo dynasty of Burma. The Burmese Siamese War began with Burmese invasion and a failed siege of Ayutthaya. A second siege led by King Bayanarung forced King Maha Chakravarti to surrender in 1564. The royal family was taken to Bago, Burma, with the king's second son Mahindratirat installed as the vassal king. In 1568, Mahindratirat revolted when his father managed to return from Bago as a Buddhist monk. The ensuing third siege captured Ayutthaya in 1569 and Bayanarung made Mahathammarat his vassal king. After Bayanarung's death in 1581, Uparaja Naresuan proclaimed Ayutthaya's independence in 1584. The Thai fought off repeated Burmese invasions, capped by an elephant duel between King Naresuan and Burmese heir apparent Mingyi Swa in 1593 during the fourth siege of Ayutthaya, in which Naresuan famously slew Mingyi Swa. Naresuan even invaded mainland Burma as far as Taungoo in 1600, but was driven back. After Naresuan's death in 1605, northern Tanandari and Lanna returned to Burmese control in 1614. The Ayutthaya Kingdom's attempt to take over Lanna and northern Tanandari in 1662–1664 failed. Foreign trade brought Ayutthaya not only luxury items but also new arms and weapons. In the mid-17th century, during King Nare's reign, Ayutthaya became very prosperous. In the 18th century, Ayutthaya gradually lost control over its provinces. Provincial governors exerted their power independently, and rebellions against the capital began. Second Burmese Wars. In the mid-18th century, Ayutthaya again became ensnared in wars with the Burmese. The Burmese Siamese War begun by the Konbaung dynasty of Burma failed. The Burmese Siamese War resulted in the sack of the city of Ayutthaya and the end of the kingdom by Dabalatio in April 1767. Kingship of Ayutthaya Kingdom. The kings of Ayutthaya were absolute monarchs with semi-religious status. Their authority derived from the ideologies of Hinduism and Buddhism as well as from natural leadership. The king of Sukhothai was the inspiration of inscription 1 found in Sukhothai, which stated that King Ramkar Weng would hear the petition of any subject who rang the bell at the palace gate. The king was thus considered as a father by his people. At Ayutthaya, however, the paternal aspects of kingship disappeared. The king was considered the Chakravarti who through his adherence to the law made all the world revolve around him. According to Hindu tradition, the king is the avatar of Vishnu, destroyer of demons, who was born to be the defender of the people. The Buddhist belief in the king is as righteous ruler, aiming at the well-being of the people and who strictly follows the teaching of Gautama Buddha. The king's official names were reflections of those religions, Hinduism and Buddhism. They were considered as the incarnation of various Hindu gods, Indra, Shiva or Vishnu. The coronation ceremony was directed by Brahmins as the Hindu god Shiva was lord of the universe. However, according to the codes, the king had the ultimate duty as protector of the people and the annihilator of evil. According to Buddhism, the king was also believed to be a bodhisattva. One of the most important duties of the king was to build a temple or a Buddha statue as a symbol of prosperity and peace. For locals, another aspect of the kingship was also the analogy of the lord of the land, or he who rules the earth. According to the court etiquette, a special language, Rachasipt, was used to communicate with or about royalty. In Ayutthaya, the king was said to grant control over land to his subjects, from nobles to commoners. According to the Sakna or Sakdina system codified by King Boromatra Lokanate, the Sakdina system was similar to, but not the same as feudalism, under which the monarch does not own the land. While there is no concrete evidence that this land management system constituted a formal palace economy, the French François Timolay de Choisy, who came to Ayutthaya in 1685, wrote, "The king has absolute power. He is truly the god of the Siamese. No one dares to utter his name. Another 17th-century writer, the Dutchman Jan van Vliet, remarked that the king of Siam was honored and worshipped by his subjects second to God. Laws and orders were issued by the king. For sometimes the king himself was also the highest judge who judged and punished important criminals such as traitors or rebels. In addition to the Sakdina system, another of the numerous institutional innovations of Burma Khanate was to adopt the position of Upparaja, translated as viceroy or prince, usually held by the king's senior son or full brother, in an attempt to regularize the succession to the throne, a particularly difficult feat for a polygamous dynasty. In practice, there was inherent conflict between king and Upparaja and frequent disputed successions. However, it is evident that the power of the throne of Ayutthaya had its limit. The hegemony of the Ayutthaya king was always based on his charisma in terms of his age and supporters. Without supporters, bloody coups took place from time to time. The most powerful figures of the capital were always generals, or the Minister of Military Department, Kalahome. During the last century of Ayutthaya, the bloody fighting among princes and generals, aiming at the throne, plagued the court. Social and political development. The reforms of King Burma Khanate placed the king of Ayutthaya at the center of a highly stratified social and political hierarchy that extended throughout the realm. Despite a lack of evidence, it is believed that in the Ayutthaya Kingdom, the basic unit of social organization was the village community composed of extended family households. Title to land resided with the headman, who held it in the name of the community. Although peasant proprietors enjoyed the use of land as long as they cultivated it, the lords gradually became courtiers and tributary rulers of minor cities. The king ultimately came to be recognized as the earthly incarnation of Shiva or Vishnu and became the sacred object of politico-religious cult practices officiated over by royal court Brahmins, part of the Buddhist court retinue. In the Buddhist context, the Devaraja was a bodhisattva. The belief in divine kingship prevailed into the 18th century, although by that time its religious implications had limited impact. With ample reserves of land available for cultivation, the realm depended on the acquisition and control of adequate manpower for farm labor and defense. The dramatic rise of Ayutthaya had entailed constant warfare and, as none of the parties in the region possessed a technological advantage, the outcome of battles was usually determined by the size of the armies. After each victorious campaign, Ayutthaya carried away a number of conquered people to its own territory, where they were assimilated and added to the labor force. Ramadhibodi II established a corvée system under which every freeman had to be registered as a frey with the local lords. Chownai. When war broke out, male frey were subject to impressment. Above the frey was an eye, who was responsible for military service, corvée labor on public works, and on the land of the official to whom he was assigned. Frey sway met labor obligations by paying a tax. If he found the forced labor under his nai repugnant, he could sell himself his or that to a more attractive nai or lord, who then paid a fee in compensation for the loss of corvée labor. As much as one-third of the manpower supply into the 19th century was composed of frey. Wealth, status, and political influence were interrelated. The king allotted rice fields to court officials, provincial governors, military commanders, in payment for their services to the crown. According to the Sakdina system, the size of each official's allotment was determined by the number of commoners or frey he could command to work it. The amount of manpower a particular headman, or official, could command determined his status relative to others in the hierarchy and his wealth. At the apex of the hierarchy, the king, who was symbolically the realm's largest landholder, theoretically commanded the services of the largest number of frey, called frey luang, who paid taxes, served in the royal army, and worked on the crown lands. However, the recruitment of the armed forces depended on Nai, or Mun Nai, literally meaning Lord, officials who commanded their own Phray Som, or subjects. These officials had to submit to the king's command when war broke out. Officials thus became the key figures to the kingdom's politics. At least 2 officials staged coups, taking the throne themselves, while bloody struggles between the king and his officials, followed by purges of court officials, were always seen. King Tralik, in the early 16th century, established definite allotments of land and Phray for the royal officials at each rung in the hierarchy, thus determining the country's social structure until the introduction of salaries for government officials in the 19th century. Outside this system to some extent were the Sangha, which all classes of men could join, and the overseas Chinese, what became centers of Thai education and culture. While during this period the Chinese first began to settle in Thailand and soon began to establish control over the country's economic life, the Chinese were not obliged to register for corvée duty, so they were free to move about the kingdom at will and engage in commerce. By the 16th century, the Chinese controlled Ayutthaya's internal trade and had found important places in the civil and military service. Most of these men took to wives because few women left China to accompany the men. Uthong was responsible for the compilation of a Dharmasastra, a legal code based on Hindu sources and traditional Thai custom. The Dharmasastra remained a tool of Thai law until late in the 19th century. A bureaucracy based on a hierarchy of ranked and titled officials was introduced, and society was organized in a related manner. However, the caste system was not adopted. The 16th century witnessed the rise of Burma, which had overrun Chiang Mai and Laos and made war on the Thai. In 1569, Burmese forces, joined by Thai rebels, mostly royal family members of Thailand, captured the city of Ayutthaya and carried off the whole royal family to Burma. Dhamaraja, a Thai governor who had aided the Burmese, was installed as vassal king at Ayutthaya. Thai independence was restored by his son, King Naresuan, who turned on the Burmese and by 1600 had driven them from the country. Determined to prevent another treason like his father's, Naresuan set about unifying the country's administration directly under the royal court at Ayutthaya. He ended the practice of nominating royal princes to govern Ayutthaya's provinces, assigning instead court officials who were expected to execute policies handed down by the king. Thereafter royal princes were confined to the capital. Their power struggles continued, but at court under the king's watchful eye. To ensure his control over the new class of governors, Naresuan decreed that all freemen subject to Phray service had become Phray Luang, bound directly to the king, who distributed the use of their services to his officials. This measure gave the king a theoretical monopoly on all manpower, and the idea developed that since the king owned the services of all the people, he also possessed all the land. Ministerial offices and governorships, and the sakdina that went with them, were usually inherited positions dominated by a few families, often connected to the king by marriage. Indeed, marriage was frequently used by Thai kings to cement alliances between themselves and powerful families, a custom prevailing through the 19th century. As a result of this policy, the king's wives usually numbered in the dozens. Even with Naresuan's reforms, the effectiveness of the royal government over the next 150 years was unstable. Royal power outside the crown lands, although in theory absolute, was in practice limited by the looseness of the civil administration. The influence of central government and the king was not extensive beyond the capital. When war with the Burmese broke out in late 18th century, provinces easily abandoned the capital. As the enforcing troops were not easily rallied to defend the capital, the city of Ayutthaya could not stand against the Burmese aggressors. Religion. Ayutthaya's main religion was Theravada Buddhism. However, many of the elements of the political and social system were incorporated from Hindu scriptures and were conducted by Brahmin priests. Many areas of the kingdom also practiced Mahayana Buddhism, Islam, and influenced by French missionaries who arrived through China in the 17th century. Some small areas converted to Roman Catholicism. The influence of Mahayana and Tantric practices also entered Theravada Buddhism, producing a tradition called Tantric Theravada.